the more connectivity you have with them, you make it personable and you make it personal. And now they feel that connection. And then they start to have some self-value where maybe they did have these roadblocks because they may have had some self-doubt. And now you're overcoming that self-doubt and you explain to them, listen, this is not a coffee clutch. This is a corporation. We need to raise our association to the next level.
HOA Insights is brought to you by 5 companies that care about board members: Association Insights and Marketplace, Association Reserves, Community Financials, Kevin Davis Insurance Services, and the Inspectors of Election. You'll find links to their website and social media in the show notes.
Welcome back to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. I'm Robert Nordlund, and I'm here today for episode number 137 with Cathleen Dunn, a manager from a large association in Pennsylvania, who I heard speak on this important subject at the CAI National Trade Show and Conference earlier this year. She's a CMCA, AMS, LSM, and PCAM, so she has all the appropriate credentials for doing her job. But what captured my attention, and the reason for having her on the show, was her topic, recruiting new board members. Now, fresh board member talent regularly changing to reflect the ever-changing makeup of the association. That's critical. It's critical to the health of the community. So get ready to hear her tips and best practices. Well, last week's episode number 136 was another conversation with regular co-host Julie Adaman on long-standing committees at your association, specifically when it's time to retire the committee. It's an interesting problem. Committees take volunteer time, and in some cases, they've outlasted their purpose. So if you missed that episode or any other prior episode, take a moment after today's program to listen from our podcast website, hoainsights.org, or watch on our YouTube channel. But better yet, subscribe from any of the major podcast platforms so you don't miss any future episodes. Well, those of you watching on YouTube can see the HOA Insights mug I have here that I got from our merch store, which you can browse through from our hoainsights.org website, or the link that we'll put in the show notes. You'll find we have some great free stuff there, like board member Zoom backgrounds and some specialty items for sale like mugs. So go to the merch store, download a free Zoom background, take a moment, look around, find the mug you'd like, and email me at podcast@reservestudy.com with your name, shipping address, and mug choice, mentioning episode 137 mug giveaway. And if you're the 10th person to email me, I'll ship that mug to you free of charge. Well, we enjoy hearing from you, responding to the issues you're facing at your association. So if you have a hot topic, a crazy story, or a question you'd like us to address, you can contact us at 805-203-3130 or email us at podcast@reservestudy.com. And this episode was prompted by Melinda from New Jersey, who wrote, "I'm frankly tired. We are supposed to have a 5-member board. It's now down to 3 because nobody wants to run. We have 88 units, but nobody seems to care. What can I do?" It's listener emails like this one that make me want to get an expert on the program, someone exactly like Kathy. So, Kathy, welcome to the program. How would you respond to Melinda?
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Melinda, you are not alone. That is something that I hear that echoes throughout our industry regularly. A lot of individuals have the same exact struggle, and it doesn't really matter if it's 20 units or if it's 5,000 units. Volunteerism overall has been down. A lot of individuals, especially since post-pandemic, they have gotten into kind of a less active role in their lives where
kind of a
they
shelter
can
in place almost.
Exactly. And and I have suffered this myself with even CAI events. I would travel 2-3 hours for an event and I would think nothing of it. Now I'm like, wow, 2-3 hours in the car. I haven't spent that much time in the car in how long? So with everyone now kind of having that more homebody feeling, it is definitely hard. And having a board that is shorthanded is very, very critical to the operation. So the first thing I would say is just start with transparency. Go out to your 88 members. If you have to, actually knock on doors and try multiple outreach tools. First and foremost, if you have a newsletter, go ahead and put something in the newsletter, even make it a little snazzy, kind of glorify the role of a board member a little bit on how they are volunteering for the betterment of your association and the betterment of everyone within the association and the industry and even your neighboring communities, because I'm sure that you also have some neighboring communities around you, and, even glorify onto their role into being your neighbor. And have some just informal conversations, maybe even have just a small little coffee clutch and explain that, that you have this board vacancy and you have an absenteeism issue with trying to fill those positions. But recruitment is definitely a process of engagement and not just an announcement. So you want to make sure that you really are putting your best foot forward. And it is going to take a little bit of time of yourself and the current board members that are in that role, but you're going to have to kind of knock some of that pavement and knock on some of those doors to be able to have that one-on-one, so they see that you're not just someone on a board dictating to them that you're a neighbor.
Let me follow up on that, because you said people are maybe more homebodies. In one sense, it seems like they might actually care more about their home and be more interested in having it be a good place. And I wish the landscaping was a little nicer, or I wish this, or I wish the pool hours, almost as if that would encourage them to be involved with the association. But what you're saying is you're seeing the opposite effect?
Yeah. And, they're kind of not going outside of their four walls. So if they're contained in their four little walls and they can get everything that they need, and many people are still working remotely, and a lot of businesses have continued to stay remote. And so going outside of the world is a little scary for them. And they're not even going to be using the pool, or they're not even going to be potentially going to the mail pavilion to pick up their mail or walk the dog. So all of those things that they used to do and they used to enjoy, they've kind of really limited it, and they're not as far reaching, in my opinion. They're not kind of looking for that long end goal. They're kind of really just kind of right in front of them, what they have in front of them, what they see in front of them, and they're just kind of satisfied. So they might want to have additional pool hours, but they don't have them. So they're kind of like, I'm not going to complain about it. Or you have on the other side of the fence where then you'll have somebody who does want different pool hours, and forget it. They're going to be knocking down every day.
You won't hear the end of it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But they're not going to run for the board either, because they want to be part of the problem, not the solution.
Did you touch on something important there? Well, I caught a couple more things. One is you talked about the recruitment process. It's not just laying something out there and hoping you get candidates. I like your idea of maybe a special meeting for interested parties. We're going to have a Q&A time about what's it like to be a board member. Maybe have some food there, make it attractive. But the whole idea that it is a recruitment process. I like that. Tell me, you're a manager for a very large association. So is that fundamentally different than a 100-unit condo?
I think in the sense that the 100-unit condo association is much easier potentially. You're going to have less individuals to gather their attention. However, you're going to be able to have a more personable impact where, I have 52 square miles of road. So knocking on everyone's door is not going to really be feasible. It's not going to be as one-on-one when you start to get into those larger numbers. So even though it's an engagement opportunity, turns into a little bit more of an announcement instead of that personal connection with the neighbor. My houses are relatively close to each other. So with them being close neighbor to neighbor, they have some interaction. But as far as, and we're broken up into 4 different sections. And so the larger you get, the more of that intimacy kind of dwindles, where I think the smaller units have a better chance of being, going to the mail, or maybe at the local Publix or at the local food store, running into their neighbor and saying, hey, by the way, did you know we have some board seats that are currently open? We're looking actively for individuals who are like-minded, who would like to support the association to make sure we have continued success.
I felt like there was a word or a phrase almost about to come out, and that's community spirit. At a smaller place, 50 units, 100 units, 20 units, 200 units, compared to you have thousands?
Yeah, we have 4,583.
And you love them all.
I know,
But yeah,
exactly. Yes.
let's just stereotype or simplify. Let's call it a 100-unit condo. Um, Community spirit. It may be a lot easier to focus on community spirit because it's a we. You can sense that, I'm on the second floor. They may be on the third floor or a different building or a different view of the river instead of the view of the woods or whatever it is, but it's our community. Perhaps you all enter on the same driveway and you enter in the lobby. The mailboxes are on your right. So maybe you can tap into the community spirit maybe a little bit easier there.
And, I also think that, and it's really great that you said that. I mean, I am wearing a logoed shirt. And I wear a logo shirt of my association whenever I'm out representing my association. And a lot of my team members wear shirts. And I also have always encouraged the board to wear shirts and my committee members. And whenever I have individuals who volunteer, I provide them with a shirt that says volunteer. And so they tend to wear it not only to my event, but they'll wear it on a Friday when they're going food shopping. And it also has another opportunity for other neighbors to say, hey, you live in a Pocono country place? Wow, what do you do there? And it starts your branding without even really putting branding together. You're marketing without really marketing. And it ends up gathering individuals to have a conversation. And it kind of, instead of that cold conversation, it's now a warm conversation. And they'll say, well, what do you do for the association? Oh, I'm a volunteer. Bingo. There you go. Yeah. They can start right there. They're farming. It's like, AAA. They're bringing them up into the big leagues and all off of a logo shirt that, it has paid for itself 10 times over again.
AAA, I'm guessing you're a baseball fan. So you go through the minors and you finally get up to the big leagues, which is the board. And is that part of the recruitment process? You talked about maybe an information meeting, announcing the openness, being transparent, communicating effectively, but this idea of the progression. How important is it for there to be a good progression? So you have a volunteer to help on the something small that they can do and do successfully, and they can say, oh, that wasn't that bad. And all of a sudden they feel like they're a little more involved. I have one client that we just finished working with. I'm looking at my map here because I know where it's at. They have 8-story building, and they have floor captains on each floor. And it's just almost a trivial role. When the board wants to communicate to the association as a whole, they're the contact point on their floor. It's real simple. How important is it to have that progression of small assignments going from volunteer on something simple to gradually a progression to a board member?
I think it's really critical because a lot of times when people jump into being a board member right off the bat, if you do encounter that, it's typically because they have a personal agenda. They received a citation, or maybe a family member received a citation, and they have a grudge against the association, but they don't understand the parliamentary rules. They don't understand the processes and really the rules and regulations. And they're just kind of a little displeased with the association. So they jump in, and sometimes they turn out to be okay board members, sometimes not so good. But starting gradually, I think, is the most important, because, and not even like having, when you do have a meeting, don't label it even a board meeting, a board member meet and greet. Make it something else. If you have a pond, make it environmental, but open it up, because they're going to say, oh, I'm not interested in being a board member. So they're not even going to go to that event because they've already resigned to the fact that they never want to be a board member. However, once you get them there, you have a conversation and you are talking about the lake or the bridge or the road, whatever the case may be, or street lights. You can pick a topic. Every association has at least one hot topic. So if short-term rentals, long-term rentals, any of that. So you kind of pick that, make that the conversational piece, make it very informal, feed them, because food does bring people. And then even if they're not willing to jump onto a committee, have the committee forms, have the committee mission statements, have the board forms, the board mission statements. But start it off more, and I've done this with a couple members where they've told me that they've been at a meeting and they're like, oh, in my prior life, I did XYZ. And I have one right now who he was an engineer for a biochemical company, and he dealt with tree treatments. And right now in our area, we have the lanternfly and we have a couple other tree eating diseases, the beech tree and all of that. So I said to him, you should really think about serving on the environmental committee. And he said, oh, no, 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 no. I don't want to serve on a committee. I don't want to volunteer. I'm way too busy. I said, you're retired. He goes, oh, yeah, yeah. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So I said, okay, well, how about, can you reach out to me? I'm going to give you a little project. Can you just write me a couple articles for my newsletter? And so I bridged him into writing some articles. And so then he started to come to a couple board meetings. And then he said to me the one day, how do I join the environmental committee? What exactly do they do? I said, well, it's funny you ask. And so I went through everything. So here it took me about 18 months.
Wow.
So I was 18
You played
months
the long
of,
game.
Yes, exactly. And he was writing me these articles, and I was submitting them to the environmental committee, and they would proof them and they would then send them on to myself for inclusion. And he started to see his newsletter articles there. So instead of writing one every other month, he was now writing one a month. And then slowly but surely, he's like, exactly. So it's, it's the long game. You're not going to always potentially get them right off the rip. But he felt useful. He felt like he was providing value, and he is retired. So he kind of felt like he had another purpose, which he didn't realize 18 months ago that he needed or wanted. And I had proved to him that he was valuable, he was respected, and his information was relevant to his neighbors. And so that kind of got him on board. And so the next phase will be getting him over to the board member realm once he kind of gets his feet wet there and is comfortable. So, my saying, I'll say to my committee members at my annual volunteer dinner is recruit one. If everybody here can recruit one, just think how powerful we can be. So talk to that neighbor, talk to that individual that you walk by every day. Talk to that person wearing the shirt in the food store, just recruit one. And so that's how we kind of keep it going to make sure that, we have that culture and we have individuals who are interested in participating without realizing that they're really going to be participating in the long run. Take that cruise ship instead of the speedboat.
Yeah. Well, I'm hear you telling this story, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking she's going to reel him in to be a board member in the next 36 months. She's got a 36-month plan to get this guy from, I don't have enough time, to he's going to be a great board member. And it all started out with a little bit of kindness, a little bit of
acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement. Yeah, I like that better. I was going to say flattery, but it's more acknowledgement. There are hot topics at every association. Maybe we need more dog waste stations, or they're always empty, or how many people are interested in adding pickleball striping to our tennis court, or pool hours, or in 2 years we expect to repaint, which is a little lead up to, we need to repaint, and that's reserves, which is always my fun topic. What about the color scheme? Are we good with the current color scheme? What about the logo? Do we need to freshen that up? What about our entry sign? There's always a hot topic. And if you can say, who wants to help? Then you are building a pipeline and you're building community. Is that a double win?
Total win.
Build.
And I love what you're talking about, like even changing the logo. A lot of associations also have maybe a meeting room, or maybe a social room, or a cafe, or, or a coffee room. Something so simple as renaming that and having a contest for a $25, $50, or $100 gift card. People love gift cards. You're pulling them in. You're like, let's rebrand our mahjong room or a game room. Let's rename it. And everybody else submit names. And then you can have everybody vote on the names. You can either have it silent or you can have it out in the open. And that draws them in. And here you have an opportunity that you never even thought, it's going to cost you $25 essentially to name Kathy's Coffee Corner, but somebody won $25 on that, and they're going to gloat about that. And now you have that warm conversation that you just opened up without even realizing it.
Yeah. And someone is now connected to the association because that's
Yep.
my name. I'm Kathy.
Exactly.
And then you made me think, it was a site inspection I went on a year ago, a high rise. And I walk in the lobby, meet the person that we're, the manager on site, and they had a box of donuts there. Compliments of the board of XYZ. Happy Tuesday. And, it was from the donut place around the corner or whatever. And I thought, how wonderful is this? I'm going to like the site inspection. This place takes care of its people. It welcomes them. They know how to spend the right amount of a trivial amount of money to make people feel like they're coming home. And it's probably good for the donut shop around the corner because people may want donuts more than just on Tuesday, that kind of stuff. And there's
Right.
lots of little things you can do to build community, build a pipeline, and make your association a place where people want to help and participate.
And then what'll also happen is that, you're building not because any community, we're gated and we are a community within our gates, but we are also a community outside of our gates. And we have all of those connections, not with just other associations, but township residents. And so now that donut company, somebody like me had a donut and I'll go into the donut shop and say, oh my goodness, I had your donuts over at my association and they were so great.
What's the one with the sprinkles on that we had? Yeah. Show me the one with the sprinkles on it.
Exactly. And so now they put the connection that, well, you just got me a customer. So then they're going to talk to other people and they're going to say, hey, so-and-so has our donuts in their association on every Tuesday. Well, what do you mean? And now that's another connection to the outside and it continues to grow. And then they kind of see it in a different light potentially also. And it just brings that whole sense of community, which we're all trying to achieve, to the forefront.
Yeah, to achieve or to get it back that we may have lost since the pandemic. Well, Kathy, look at the clock here. I've been enjoying this. It's time to take a break and hear from one of our generous sponsors, after which we'll be back with more common sense for common areas, and we'll talk about some more practical steps for what you can do to recruit board members at your association.
Numbers matter, and we need numbers like game scores and bank balances to let us know where we stand. The same is true for your association. Is yours thriving or struggling? Let me introduce you to the FiPho Health Score, like your own personal FICO credit score. Now in one simple number, owners and boards can learn the combined financial, physical, and operational health of their association. The good news, it's free at ourfipho.com. That's our, FIPHO.com. Learn how your association measures up.
And we're back. Well, Kathy, we're talking during the break about this process and how there's, like in so many things, there's multiple good things that start to happen. When you're working the process, you actually are effectively screening for, and did we say good candidates? Is that one way you can avoid the, let me be careful here, problem candidates?
Most definitely, because once you have a candidate that you've kind of brought up through the farm system and you've kind of groomed them into being a great committee member, a great community member.
Someone who believes in the association.
Exactly. They're proud to be there. They're proud to represent. They glow when somebody talks about their association. And, this day and age in social media, they will also be your cheerleader. They've had such a positive position where they never thought that they would be. And now they're on a different foot and they're actually contributing. You're acknowledging them and they're feeling very positive. And, they are now going to take that step forward where previously they would not take that leap on their own. And they would just kind of push it off as too much work. They're not interested. They don't know enough about it. And they would have all these roadblocks to not make them a successful board member or committee member.
Real or imagined roadblocks.
Exactly. And they'll make those roadblocks very easily because everybody says, oh, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough skill. I don't have enough patience. I hear a lot of people say, quite frankly, I don't like people. And
that's fine.
Right. And it's like, okay, well, that's okay. Because, you're not going to have a huge...
I don't like people either.
Exactly. Boy, we already have something in common, break the ice even with them.
Yeah.
then really you take their guard down. Now they're like, now what do I say?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We're talking about a business here and the business of the association. And we need people like you who are not here just because it's all fun and games, because frankly, it isn't fun and games. Do you have a dog? I know you have a dog. Do we have enough pet waste stations? Whatever it is, you can link them in and get them. Is that what you're talking about here? Link them in and get them going?
Exactly. And
Okay.
I think that's so important because the more connectivity you have with them, you make it personable and you make it personal. And now they feel that connection. And then they start to have some self-value where maybe they did have these roadblocks because they may have had some self-doubt. And now you're overcoming that self-doubt. And you explain to them, listen, this is not a coffee clutch. This is a corporation. We need to raise our association to the next level, whether that is aesthetically, financially, through the organization level, maybe, through management, through staffing. Sometimes it's self-managed. Sometimes it is managed by association management company, or sometimes it's board managed. So all of those different situations, there's still that fiduciary responsibility, and you want them to realize their decisions and their skills, their values, their input. It's important. Their collaboration is really going to make a difference. And when they start to realize that on the small scale, they now start to kind of go to the watering hole more and more and get interested. And then you can actually groom them into being a great board member and a great team leader, or even a team, co-supporter. Yeah.
This almost sounds like we're feeding them the Kool-Aid and inviting them into a cult. But I heard you talking about things that don't require a particular skill. Once they have a bite of the apple, oh, gee, now I'm doing it. Once they realize that, this is my community and I can help by contributing an idea. The gentleman that you were talking about, who's an expert, care for the property financially, organizationally, physically. You just need to be an average, I want to say average grown-up human who loves their community. And that brings us to what we were talking about again during the break, how to avoid toxic board members. And the more you can do to populate the pipeline, fill the pipeline with people who like the community, who have skills, who have interest, rather than the complainer who is about ready to wage war. Help me finish that thought.
Yeah. And, and that's really important because every association is going to have a few dissidents, and, they're going to have their personal agenda, and they don't necessarily understand the entire internal operations, or maybe even the external. And the last thing you want to do is you don't want to get them on the board when they're tainted, because now the board's progress is actually going to be defeated and slowed down with, quote unquote, their personal agendas or their personal dissatisfaction. So if you do have those individuals, most associations do have a code of conduct, but you really try to not go that route because A, it's embarrassing to the person and it's embarrassing to the organization. The last thing I want my board to do is to have to announce at a public meeting a board member who's being admonished because they didn't know how to play in the sandbox nicely. But it happens, unfortunately, but it really hurts the credibility of the board. So the more that you can get them with, some people just have a difficult personality.
Yep.
But if you can figure out what their difficult personality trait may be, maybe you can educate them more. And some people are never going to be educated and they're never going to want to know anything different than what they feel. But if you can be transparent with them, you have a much better chance of having that board connection, that community connection, that they may not even make that leap to be a board member, but they now will at least pipe down a bit.
Yeah. I was thinking something my mom would say. She'd say, there are some people out there who will say, my mind is made up, don't confuse me with the facts. And there may be the people who are dissidents and you want to keep them away from running from the board. Would you, if that is a person challenging the board on financials, would you have a meeting with them and say, here's the bank statements, here's the budget. be transparent and avoid that problem. Is that a possibility?
Oh, most definitely. And that is worth its weight in gold.
Okay.
When I have a homeowner who is completely dissatisfied, I say to them, look at our last 13 years of audits. We have had a clean audit every year for the last 13 years. And I always tell them, and a lot of them many times are prior to my arrival here at the association. Okay. And maybe they had an issue with the board, or maybe they had an issue with the management team. And I'll stop them right there and I'll say, listen, that's in the past. We're going to move forward. I understand that you had an issue then, but come meet with me. Let's go over this. Let's look at the monthly financials. We're transparent every month in the board packet. Yeah. I just had someone recently who they said, we need to spend money better. I went over to my waiting room and I have a slots there with flyers and the monthly board packet that we put out. And I said, have you ever seen this board packet? And he said, no. I said, you've lived here for 13 years and you've never seen this board packet. And so I went through the board packet with him. I explained to him, read your email. We send it to you every month. Read the newsletter. I pulled out the newsletter. I gave him a copy of the newsletter. I went through the I&E with him. I said, do you understand, this is where your money goes. When he left, my receptionist said to me, how did that just happen? And I said, what's that? And she said to me, he was so angry and he was giving me a handful. And I thought when you came out that it was going to be fireworks. She goes, and he left shaking your hand and wanting to hug you and thanking you for everything. And I said, well, a lot of times it's about education. And he just wasn't educated because he did not want to be educated because he was angry. And so when I took away his...
Let the steam out.
Yes,
pop this balloon.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and that took a little bit of your time. Are we talking 15 minutes?
Yeah, probably 20 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, not a big investment of time. And I wonder if you could have dangled, well, we're having a budget meeting next month. We would love to have you participate to make sure there's people like you who don't understand, who can then help understand it better. Maybe you can help us spread the message, and then
which
use
I did.
Every opportunity to. Not surprised. And,
I gave him my little board workshop. I said, 2026 budget's upcoming. Here's the flyer and here's the dates when we'll all be meeting. So you will be able to have that opportunity. He's not ready to be a committee member, but he's at least ready to be educated. And so I said, here is our monthly, our weekly meetings for the next 2 months that are up and coming with the budget committee as well as the board. And here's the information so that you can come. I said, they're in person at the clubhouse and you can come and meet some of your neighbors. So, and he left floating on air, and I said, okay, we got to win today.
Yep. Yeah. Because he had been too busy to read the stuff that had been provided, and a little bit of personal attention turned the corner. I want to talk about, let's say you're an association where you have 5 board members and there's 1 or 2 dissidents, and it's a regular 3 versus 2 or a 4 versus 1. How comfortable are you trusting the democratic process that if you try to stay ahead as much as possible, the dissidents will stay in the minority?
So the democratic process, democracy overall, everybody wants to be heard. And it works best when everyone's informed. The more information that you can give them, the more communication that you can provide is going to be able to get them to be, I always tell my board members, and I have a board of 9, and we do sometimes have, 7 to 2, 7 to 2, 7 to 2. And I will now focus on the 2, not the 7. And I explain to them, once you and my board president is wonderful. And we'll say, once you get out of this meeting, you may have not been in favor of it, but as a board, we are one voice. So we now have unity. Exactly. And so I will now focus on those 2, and I'll kind of handle them with kid gloves and try to turn them on. And I will over-educate them and over-inform them so that they can understand more of the organization and more of the board role, to try to get them to understand how the board votes, why the board votes, making sure that they have a focus on community rather than their personal agenda. Because a lot of times that's what it is they personally either don't like it, or they don't know enough about it, or they just want to be that kind of hot topic individual. And so now it's my job to kind of hone in on them and kind of manage them, even though they're not my staff, and my board president will do the same. We kind of work to manage them and to make sure that we reduce that confusion and that tension and try to get them to be on the same page. Not everybody's going to agree. And that's okay, because that's what's so beautiful about, the democratic process. Democracy has given us all a choice and a voice. And as long as we do it respectfully and informed, I think that it can all play into it. And many times I've seen even dissidents on the board who they've provided input, and I've had others who have changed their votes because they've actually provided valuable information. But prior to, they were maybe a yeller, or maybe they were boisterous, or maybe they would raise their hands and fuss. Where now I've gotten them to be able to manage their emotion, and they have been able to verbally provide their either negative impact that it would be considered negative in a much different approach, because so many times it's on delivery. It's not on the content. And if I could get them even that much to soften their edges a little bit so they're not so curt, somebody will listen to them and go, oh, wow, that was really, Kathy, that was a great idea. Meanwhile, they disliked Kathy because Kathy was just yelling all the time. Well, Kathy didn't know how to properly communicate. And so that has really aided into making them more informed and making sure that they understand that that's why we're all here. We have a job to do. I manage my staff members and I take direction from my board, but ultimately my board needs to be trained just as I need to have continuing education and continue training as well.
Yeah. Well, I was writing down some notes from that, and it made me think about how we run things here at our company. There are times when I hear from my partners and they may want different things, but I tell them very clearly, I heard you. I appreciate your input, but we're going to go this direction. But that you're talking about the human dynamic where you're dealing with people, dealing with the board members, a 7 versus 2, or the 3 versus 2, or whatever it is at an association. I heard you. Thank you for that. But we're going to be clear that together we are moving the association this direction. But at least being clear, make sure that they are heard. Give them that human dynamic that they are valuable. It's not personal. It has nothing to do with you being you, me being me, but it's 3-2 and we move forward on this. And I think it is, I'm comfortable that we trust the democratic process. But Kathy, I got so much pleasure out of hearing that you took that 20 minutes with this dissident, firebrand, and you turned him into someone who smiled and a potential candidate for at least coming to a financial meeting. That just sounds like what brings, well, that's why you're here on the program, because that's how you tick. I think that's what
and the thing
brings
is, if he doesn't show up, I'll message him and say, hey, by the way, I didn't see you at any of the meetings.
Yeah.
So he couldn't just blow me off.
And it's that open invite to participate, and that warmness, that welcomeness, I think is so much about what we're talking about here. Well, to our audience, it's time to start wrapping this up. Kathy provided a volunteer information form that can help maybe formalize this process. We'll see if we can get that into the show notes. But Kathy, it was great talking with you and having you on the program. Any closing thoughts to add at this time?
I just want to say, when you live in an association, yes, we are corporations. Yes, we are a business. But we are all about community and how we can together grow our organization. So regardless of whether or not you want your grass 6 inches or 8 inches, we're all human. We all put our pants on one leg at a time. And at the end of the day, we're all here together to make our living environment the best that it can be. So, I encourage everyone to have more involvement, even if it is just a silent outside involvement of reading a newsletter or replying to a news blast, supporting your association at the food store or at the local gas station by just seeing a neighbor and saying hello. The sense of civility and the sense of neighbor is so critical. And your board members are not here to hammer anyone and to remove their voice. They're here to be your voice. They're elected, or they step into the role to fill a very important role to move your association forward. So get involved, and more importantly, just let's be human to each other, and let's know that, we all coexist for the same positive purpose.
Couldn't have said it better. Kathleen, it's tremendous to have you on the program today. Well, if you'd like to get in touch with, I said it, Kathleen, I'm elevating you in stature now. If you want to get in touch with Kathy or send her a follow-up question, you can reach out to her via email at cm, think community manager, at apcppoa.com. And she was also bold enough to offer her, and she'll careful, if you live close, she'll probably recruit you as a board member. Offer her cell number, which is 570-972-8505. So we hope you learned some HOA insights from our discussion today that helps you bring common sense to your common areas. We look forward to having you join us for another great episode next week.
You've been listening to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. If you like the show and want to support the work that we do, you can do so in a number of ways. The most important thing that you can do is engage in the conversation. Leave a question in the comment section on our YouTube videos. You can also email your questions or voice memos to podcast@reservestudy.com or leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. If you gain any insights from the show, please do us a huge favor by sharing the show with other board members that you know. You can also support us by supporting the brands that sponsor this program. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the hosts and guests, with the goal of providing general education about the community association industry. You'll want to consult licensed professionals before making any important decisions. Finally, this podcast was expertly mixed and mastered by Stokelight Video and Marketing. With Stokelight on your team, you'll reach more customers with marketing expertise that inspires action. See the show notes to connect with Stokelight.